The subject of this recording is mindfulness of the body. We already made a video about the mindfulness of breathing, and the main principle is applied to mindfulness of the body as well, but it's useful also to open up more fully and to explain more fully how mindfulness of the body is practiced. And this is particularly in regard to body position and body movements. So the basic explanation that is most commonly referred to throughout the suttas sounds quite simple, but at the same time we have quite a few different interpretations of it. And it says basically just that when you are sitting, you know that you are sitting. When you stand, you know that you are standing. When you lie down, you know that you're lying down. And the same thing when you're moving, when you bend and stretch the arms and legs, turning right and turning left, going forward and going back, you know that you are doing these things. But now the question is, what are we aware of in regard to these things? What does it mean to know that we are doing? What is the right way of knowing? And the most common way of understanding it comes back essentially to being aware of sensations on our body, which is not useful. Any athlete is going to be aware of the sensations in his body when he's training. If you're doing push-ups, you're aware that you're bending and stretching your arms and legs, absolutely, and you're aware of the sensation in them. Even animals are aware of the sensation of walking. They're not just having no awareness of that at all. So the first thing to understand in regard to mindfulness of the body is to understand the nature of mindfulness, and this way of knowing and being aware. It's not the same. It cannot be the same awareness and knowledge that everybody automatically has anyway, because it's not through knowing something that you already know and that you're aware of all the time anyway to a greater or lesser extent, that there can be some kind of higher wisdom or knowledge that arises. So let's try to see how to pay attention. It's easy to see that constantly the body is moving. Observe it yourself, just right now as you're listening. Either you're sitting in a chair or you're doing something else. Whatever you're doing, you are blinking, you're swallowing from time to time. Even if you're just sitting more or less still, you're still stretching and bending some muscles. You're not as still as a rock. So there are continually movements. The body is moving. And usually we're not aware of this if we are concentrated on something outside. For example, if you're concentrated on listening to this or you're concentrated on doing something else, you won't be really aware of what movements your body is doing. They're just happening automatically. And if we want to become aware, how most people try to pay attention and become aware is that you end up just knowing about the sensation of moving. You know about the movement after you've already moved. So if you try to be aware of, let's say, try to be aware of blinking, you will know only the sensation of the lids of the eyes touching the skin. Or if you try to be aware of turning your head, that means that you are aware of what you see when you turn your head, or that you're aware of the sensation of the head turning. But in all of this, however much we try to practice this and however much we continue, we will still know nothing at all about how the body is moving, what is causing the movement. We know only about every movement only after it's already started, and we're ignorant of how it has been formed. When you go to open a door to come into a room, your hand reaches out to touch the handle, but are you aware? Do you know before your hand reaches out that you're going to reach out and take the handle? Do you know what is sending the hand to reach the handle? Or do you only know about it afterwards? You can check these things. Try to observe it. Or when your hand moves to scratch your head, do you do it automatically? Does it happen automatically? Or do you know before? And usually you can see this, that always we only know afterwards if we're aware of it at all. And when we're only knowing afterwards, we're always going to be very much in ignorance, in moha. There's no insight, there's no discernment, there's no wisdom here. And we can't get rid of kilesa in this way. That's very important to understand. There's no way to wear away our kilesa, because most of the time when we move, when we speak, it's already going to be caused by desire and ignorance on a bigger or smaller scale. Even, let's say, turning our head without awareness is, first of all, done automatically in the cloud of just not knowing. So already this is unwholesome. Already this is, we call it moha. And secondly, if we turn out of curiosity, let's say, to get a glimpse of something pleasant or entertaining, this is desire, this is tanha at work within us. But if we're only working to be mindful of the sensation of turning our head, or mindful of what we're seeing when we're turning our head, we don't know about the desire as it's born, we don't know about it, and we can't do anything about it. How can we become master of it? But if we know before moving, if we're mindful of our mind before turning the head, we know the intention of turning our head, then this is the condition that allows us to choose with wisdom what we do, and therefore to have no greed or craving in our mind as we act. So it's very important. I hope you can see the distinction between these two ways of paying attention. There is actually one sutta where this is mentioned and explained. He gives an example of one monk named Nanda, and he says this is how he guards his 6 sense doors. If he has to look to the east, he does so after knowing fully the intention in his mind, so that when he looks east, bad and unwholesome states of desire and unhappiness will not flow into him. So it's saying exactly that. He knows the intention in his mind before turning his head, before looking right, left, up or down, in order that, as he is doing so, his mindfulness will not allow kilesa to enter. So this was the first main point I wanted to explain about mindfulness of the body, that it should serve directly to remove kilesa, and knowing about sensation on the body cannot do this. Sati, mindfulness, knows the mind. The function of mindfulness is to know the mind, and in this case, it's watching how the mind directs the body. But don't get confused, we are still talking about mindfulness of the nature of the body, but it has to start with knowing the mind, because precisely it is only this that will be able to give us insight into the nature of the body. And why is that? Because if we're not aware of the function of the mind and how it relates to the body, then we can't know about the nature of the body, because we just see everything as one. How do we talk? How do we think of it normally? We say, I went here, I went there, I ate this, I drank that, I made this. In this way, we make the body and mind and think of it as one entity, one I. We can't know anything about either the body or mind by seeing it in this way. But by becoming aware of our mind first, then we can open up the machine, we can separate the two, and we can see how they work together, we can understand both. But to re-emphasize, this way of being aware is not something easy or automatic. We have to be very careful about thinking we know how to watch, we know how to pay attention. Because the interpretations we will usually make of how to practice will tend to follow what we already know and what we're already familiar with. It's just natural. So therefore, for example, we'll think that mindfulness is awareness of sensations, which we know already. Or some people say that it's like talking to ourselves, repeating, let's say I'm pouring tea, I should be repeating to myself in my mind, pouring, pouring. Or when I'm walking, I should be repeating in my mind, stepping right, stepping left. Which again, we already know how to talk to ourselves about what we're doing. This is nothing new. But this is not mindfulness. We're just adding like another layer actually of noise in our mind, and we can't see the actual thing as it's happening. We're talking about it instead. So some points that I have found helpful in order to bring my mind to the right place, to bring my attention to the right place. For example, we can ask ourselves the question, can the body move by itself? Is it possible for the body to move without a mind? The body is made of organic matter, bones, flesh and blood. It knows nothing and can do nothing by itself. So what makes it move? What is the thing that makes it move? And movement can occur for many different reasons. A dead fish, for example, can be carried along by the current of the river. But what makes the fish go against the stream? What makes a bird fly against the wind? These were 2 questions that Lumpa Ajahn's teacher gave him to work on when he was practicing in Thailand. So this is a place to try to be aware right at the moment that the action is formed in the mind, right at the moment that the mind sends the hand to go and get something or sends the foot forward. We might not get the hang of it right in the beginning. And that's why it's also quite tricky to explain this thing and to make it clear by a video. And generally it's better to have a living guide who knows and who can explain and correct and clear up doubts that we might have. So for now I'll just conclude with another example that I found very helpful, which is that it's like a puppet and a puppet master. When we're a child, we might watch a puppet show, and we get pulled into the story, knowing only the puppet and the story of what he's doing, and we only look at the superficial image of his character, this puppet. We get carried away in his gains and losses, and we cry when he's hurt and we're rejoicing when he's well. And as an ordinary person who doesn't know Dhamma, we are just like the child who is totally just one with the story of what's going on in the puppet show, never questioning what it's made of or how it is formed or what's actually going on, whether it's real or not, what is the reality of what is happening. So mindfulness of the body is learning to become an adult and see the puppet show for what it is, see the puppet for what it is. But as long as we concentrate only on the figure of the puppet, we can never really realize its nature. We have to turn back to look at the puppet master and watch how he's directing this object made of fabric and wood. That then we can separate the two. Then we can understand how this puppet is directed and how it moves. And we can see and realize that, in fact, it's nothing but an object made of fabric and wood. In the same way, we have to be able to look back and see our mind in order to be able to understand the nature of this body made of organic matter, flesh and bones.